I watched the conference room door swing open, and everyone fell silent. Mr. Harrison stood in the doorway, his face pale. Behind him, Jennifer and Brandon exchanged looks, the kind that said everything had just changed. The Meridian account was dead. 3 years of work, $4.2 million in potential revenue, and it was gone. Or so they thought. But that's not where this story starts. Let me take you back. 3 years earlier, I was the girl nobody noticed. My name is Ashley Mitchell, and I was 28 years old, fresh out of a marketing degree from State, with a studio apartment in Oak Ridge that cost more than my monthly salary. I'd landed the internship at Hartwell Marketing Solutions through sheer luck. My college roommate's dad knew someone in HR. Entry-level position, $28,000 a year, no benefits until year 2, and a cubicle wedged between the copy machine and the kitchen that always smelled like burnt coffee. Hartwell occupied the 5th and 6th floors of the Riverside Commerce Building downtown. It was the kind of place where the senior partners had corner offices with views of the city skyline, and people like me ate lunch alone at our desks while scrolling through LinkedIn, wondering if we'd ever matter. The company did solid work, marketing campaigns for regional tech firms, hospitality chains, some healthcare stuff. Nothing glamorous, nothing that made you feel like you were changing the world. But it paid the bills. Barely. My first day, I arrived early. I always do. I wanted to get ahead, to prove I wasn't just some nepotism hire. I wore the blazer my mom had bought me, navy blue with a stain on the inside of the pocket that nobody could see. I set up my desk with care. A small plant from Target, a framed photo of my parents at their 30th anniversary party, a calendar with motivational quotes that my therapist had suggested. By 10 a.m., the mockery had started. "Oh, look who's got the motivational calendar," Jennifer called out from her cubicle. She was a junior account manager, 5 years my senior, with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you're better than everyone else in the room. "What's this one say? Every day is a new opportunity? God, that's cringe." Brandon laughed from across the way. He was the other junior account manager, tall and blonde, the kind of guy who coasted on charm and connections. His father was a lawyer. His mother was on the board of the downtown theater. He'd never worried about money in his life. "She's got to learn the Hartwell way," he said, walking over to my desk. "We don't do motivational here. We do cynical. We do practical. We do whatever it takes to win the account." I wanted to disappear into my chair. I smiled anyway, the smile I'd perfected in middle school when kids mocked my thrift store clothes, the smile that said nothing could touch me. "I'm just trying to stay positive," I said. "Yeah, well, positive doesn't close deals," Jennifer said, and they both walked away laughing. That was a Monday. By Friday, they'd named me the intern, as if I didn't have a first name. They'd move my assignments to the bottom of their priority lists, then complain when I didn't deliver on impossible timelines. They'd forget to include me in team meetings, then ask why I hadn't contributed ideas. One time, Brandon took credit for a social media strategy I'd spent 12 hours developing, just casually mentioned it in a client call while I sat in the corner, nodding along. The worst part? Nobody stopped them. Not the senior managers, not the partners. Mr. Harrison, the managing director, would walk past my cubicle and maybe offer a polite nod. Linda, the office manager, would sometimes bring me coffee from the break room and tell me to hang in there, sweetie, as if I were being brave by just existing in the same space as Jennifer and Brandon. But I had a plan. I was going to work harder than everyone else. I was going to learn everything. I was going to become so valuable that they couldn't ignore me. My parents had raised me on the idea that hard work beats talent when talent isn't working hard. That had gotten my dad through 3 recessions at his insurance job. It had gotten my mom through nursing school at 42. It would get me through this. I started staying late, 10 p.m., 11 p.m., sometimes past midnight. I'd volunteer for grunt work that nobody wanted, data entry, competitor analysis, cold call lists. I'd sit in on client calls when they'd let me, trying to absorb the rhythm of how deals actually happened. I read every article about marketing strategy I could find. I watched YouTube videos on copywriting. I taught myself basic HTML and CSS so I could help with website updates. 6 months in, I was still making $28,000 a year. Jennifer and Brandon were still mocking me. But something had shifted. One afternoon in late spring, I was organizing files in the server room when I overheard a conversation between Mr. Harrison and one of the senior partners, David Chen. They were standing just outside the open door, not realizing I could hear them. "The Meridian thing is a problem," David was saying. "They want a full rebrand, website, collateral, social strategy, the works. It's a 6-figure project easily, but their CEO is particular, wants someone young on the team, someone who understands Gen Z, all that TikTok stuff. Can't send them Jennifer and Brandon, both too slick, too corporate. They'll see right through the BS." My heart started pounding. Meridian. That was Meridian Technologies, a mid-sized software company that had been getting a lot of buzz. They were innovative, scrappy, growing like crazy. A client like that could put Hartwell on the map. "So what do we do?" Mr. Harrison asked. There was a pause. Then David said something that changed everything. "We need someone authentic, someone who actually gets it, someone they can trust." I stood in that server room, holding a stack of files, and made a decision that I'd spend the next 3 years defending. I was going to make sure they noticed me. I took a deep breath and walked out of the server room. My hands were steady. My mind was made up. I was going to volunteer for the Meridian account, and I was going to prove that I belonged at that table. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Mr. Harrison. His assistant, Karen, gave me that look, the one that said interns didn't usually get face-to-face time with the managing director. But she scheduled me anyway, probably out of pity. I sat in his office at 9 a.m. sharp, wearing the same navy blazer, the stain still hidden in the pocket. Mr. Harrison was reviewing something on his computer, and it took him a solid 30 seconds to acknowledge me. When he did, he leaned back in his chair and offered a tired smile. "Ashley, right? The intern from marketing support?" "Yes, sir," I said. "I wanted to talk to you about the Meridian Technologies account." His eyebrows went up. "You know about that?" "I overheard David mentioning it to you in the hallway," I said, deciding honesty was better than pretending I had inside information. "I know they need someone who understands their audience, someone authentic. I think I can be that person." He studied me for a moment. "You've been here, what, 6 months?" 7, and I've spent every one of them learning how this company works. I've sat in on 17 client calls. I've read every strategy document in our archives. I've taught myself HTML and CSS. I know social media strategy better than anyone on this floor because I actually live on social media. I'm their target demographic. It was the most confident thing I'd ever said to an authority figure. Part of me expected him to laugh and send me back to my cubicle. Instead, he nodded slowly. "You realize Jennifer and Brandon would be the primary account managers. You'd be support." "I understand," I said. "You'd be working nights and weekends for the first month. No overtime pay, no bonuses until the project wraps." "I understand," I said again. He leaned forward. "Why do you want this so badly?" I thought about that for a moment. The real answer was complicated. I wanted to prove something to myself, to my parents, to everyone who thought I was just another kid who'd lucked into a job. But I gave him the version that he needed to hear. "Because I actually care about getting it right," I said. "Not just closing the deal, getting it right." Something in that answer landed. He picked up his phone and called David. "We're putting the intern on Meridian. Full support role. Tell Jennifer and Brandon they'll be working with her." I left his office feeling like I'd swallowed electricity. The first meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Jennifer and Brandon found out about my involvement approximately 45 seconds after Mr. Harrison's announcement. I watched Jennifer's face go through about 6 different shades of red as she walked over to my cubicle. "So you're on the Meridian account?" she said, not bothering with a greeting. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice level. "That's interesting, because I'm pretty sure you don't have the experience for a client of that caliber." "Mr. Harrison disagrees," I said. Brandon appeared beside her, arms crossed. "This is a mess," he said. "She's going to tank this. We should go to David and tell him this was a mistake. Go ahead, I said. I was surprised by how calm I sounded, but I'd suggest you wait to see what I actually deliver before you start complaining. They walked away, and I realized I'd just made two enemies who had a lot more power than I did. But I'd also made a decision. I wasn't going to back down. The Meridian Technologies team was small but sharp. The CEO was a woman named Rachel Kim, early 40s, with the kind of intensity that comes from building something from nothing. She had a CTO, a head of product, and a marketing director named Marcus who was about 30 and wore vintage band t-shirts under his blazer. We met in one of Hartwell's conference rooms. Jennifer and Brandon sat at the head of the table, me wedged in between them, my laptop open and my notes organized in a color-coded folder. The moment Rachel walked in, I could feel the shift in energy. Jennifer started with the standard pitch: brand positioning, market analysis, competitive landscape. It was good work, technically, smooth, professional, completely soulless. Rachel listened politely for about 15 minutes. Then she stopped Jennifer mid-sentence. "This is perfect for a Fortune 500 company," Rachel said, "but we're not that. We're still scrappy. We're still figuring it out. And your pitch sounds like every other marketing firm that's walked through that door." Brandon jumped in. "We can tailor it to your specific—" "Can you?" Rachel asked. She turned to look at me. "Who's this?" "That's Ashley," Jennifer said quickly. "She's our support staff for this project." "What do you think, Ashley?" Rachel asked. I felt Jennifer's eyes on me. This was the moment where I could play it safe, agree with everything they said, stay in my lane. Or I could tell the truth. "I think your CEO is right," I said. "That pitch is generic. It's designed to work for anyone, which means it works for no one. You need something that actually reflects who you are, the risk-taking, the innovation, the fact that you're still hungry. Most of your customers are going to be younger professionals who've been burned by corporate culture. They're going to see through the corporate speech." There was a long silence. Then Rachel smiled. "Okay, I like her. What would you do differently?" I glanced at Jennifer, who looked like she wanted to stab me with her pen. Then I opened my laptop. "I'd start by actually talking to your users, not surveying them but having real conversations. I'd find out what problems they're solving, what keeps them up at night, why they chose you over the alternatives. Then I'd build your entire campaign around those conversations. Make them real, make them human. No corporate speak, no stock photos, just honest storytelling from actual people." Marcus was leaning forward now, interested. "And then?" he asked. "Then I'd build a social strategy that treats your audience like they're intelligent, because they are. TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, but done differently. Behind-the-scenes content, dev team challenges, real conversations with your CEO about the industry, the market, the competition. People want to follow people, not brands, so give them that." "How long would this take?" Rachel asked. "To develop the full strategy? 3 weeks. To launch the first phase? 1 week." Jennifer made a noise. "That's an insane timeline." "Only if you're starting from scratch," I said. "I've already done most of the preliminary research. I can have a full proposal and creative deck to you by Friday." Rachel stood up and extended her hand. "I want you running point on this, Ashley. Not the account managers, you. They can support you, but you're leading the creative direction." Jennifer's face went absolutely white. The next week was a blur. I barely slept. I conducted interviews with 37 of Meridian's users, taking detailed notes on what they said, how they said it, what genuinely excited them about the product. I analyzed their social media engagement, their competitors, their market positioning. I drafted creative concepts, built mood boards, wrote copy that sounded like actual humans talking to each other instead of robots reading a script. By Thursday night, I had a 60-page proposal and a creative deck that I genuinely believed in. I sent it to Rachel at 11:47 p.m. and then just sat in my apartment, staring at the wall, unable to sleep even though I was completely exhausted. Her email came back at 6:33 a.m. Friday morning. "This is exactly what we needed. Let's move forward. I want you to oversee the entire project. We'll sign the contract next week." I read that email 7 times. Then I called my mom and cried for 10 minutes straight, the kind of crying where you can't actually form words. The news spread through Hartwell like wildfire. I'd somehow gone from the girl nobody noticed to the girl who'd landed the biggest new account in 3 years. Except nobody celebrated me. What they did was worse. They started to realize that I was a threat. Jennifer and Brandon stopped talking to me entirely. They'd sit at their desks with their headphones in, ignoring every email I sent, every update I tried to share. When I had to interact with them for client materials, they gave me one-word answers and disappeared. But I could feel them plotting something. I could see the whispered conversations with other people in the office, the pointed looks, the way conversations would stop when I walked by. 3 weeks into the Meridian project, everything changed. I was in my apartment on a Saturday afternoon, working, always working, when my phone rang. It was David Chen. His voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. "Ashley, where are you right now?" "I'm home. Why?" "I need you to come to the office. Now." I got there in 20 minutes. The 5th floor was empty except for David, Mr. Harrison, Jennifer, and Brandon. They were all standing in the conference room. My stomach dropped. "Sit down," David said. I sat. "We've discovered some irregularities with the Meridian account," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "It appears that you've been billing for hours you didn't actually work, specifically the night research sessions. You've been claiming to work from midnight to 6 a.m., but your keycard shows you leaving the building at 9 p.m. My mouth went dry. "I do that work at home. The proposal that was created on company time, using company resources, for a company project, which means it belongs to Hartwell, not to you. And if you're billing for time you didn't spend in this office, that's time fraud." "I wasn't. That's not what happened," I said. "I work at home because I want to do better work. I'm not stealing hours. I'm doing extra work." "That's not what the numbers show," Jennifer said, and there was actual satisfaction in her voice. "We reviewed your billing and your keycard data. You're consistently claiming hours that don't match your physical presence in the building." I felt like I was drowning. "Can I see the billing records?" David slid over another document, and there it was, my name, next to hours I'd claimed that, according to the keycard data, I hadn't been physically present for. Except I had been there. I'd been there working until midnight, 1 sometimes 3 but my keycard. Oh God, my keycard. I looked at Jennifer, really looked at her, and something in her face shifted, just for a second, before she looked away. "I want to be clear about something," David said. "We take this very seriously. This is a violation of company policy and potentially a legal matter. We're going to have to notify Rachel Kim that the account manager they wanted to work with has committed time fraud." "No," I said. "No, you can't do that. I didn't commit fraud. I worked those hours at home. Rachel knows I worked those hours. She got the results." "Rachel got results from work that she thought was being billed honestly," Mr. Harrison said quietly. "If she finds out otherwise, she's going to question the entire project, and we're going to lose that account." The room was spinning. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you're suspended pending investigation," David said. "You'll be on administrative leave for 2 weeks while we look into this. We'll be conducting a full audit of your billing records for the past 3 months." "And the Meridian project?" "Jennifer and Brandon will take over." I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I stood anyway. "I want to talk to Rachel before you do anything else." "You can't contact any clients," David said. "You're suspended. That includes Meridian." I walked out of that conference room in a daze. I took the elevator down to the lobby and stood on the street outside the Riverside Commerce Building, not quite believing what had just happened. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Marcus from Meridian. Rachel asked me to reach out." She tried to call the office and got transferred to David Chen, who said there was a situation with the account and that Jennifer and Brandon would be taking over. "Rachel is confused and concerned. What's going on?" I stared at that message for a long time. Then I called him. "Marcus, I need to tell you something, but I need you to listen without interrupting until I'm done," I told him everything. The time fraud accusation, the suspended billing, the way it had happened right after I'd landed the account. I told him about my keycard data, about how I knew I'd been working those hours, about how I suspected, though I couldn't prove, that Jennifer and Brandon had somehow manipulated the records. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Okay," Marcus said finally. "Here's what's going to happen. Rachel is calling your managing director in about 30 seconds, and then we're getting lawyers involved, because this is either fraud or a massive setup, and either way, it's illegal." The next 48 hours were a blur of phone calls, lawyers, and increasingly frantic emails from David and Mr. Harrison asking me to work with them on resolving the situation quietly. But I wasn't quiet. I was pissed. I pulled every single piece of evidence I had, the emails where I'd updated Rachel on my progress with timestamps showing I was working late, the Slack messages to Marcus with drafts and revisions at 2 a.m., the Google Docs showing my editing history on the creative deck, 137 revisions, most of them between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m., the photos I'd taken during late-night research sessions with timestamps proving I'd been in my apartment working, not anywhere else. And then I asked Marcus to check something. I asked him to pull the keycard data for the entire office for the week that Jennifer and Brandon claimed I'd been fraudulently billing. What he found was beautiful. Jennifer had used her keycard to access the building at 11:47 p.m. on the exact night my fraudulent billing supposedly started. She'd been in the building for 3 hours. The security footage, which Marcus requested through their legal team, showed her sitting at her own desk, then walking over to the server room where the time billing system was located. The time billing system that I had administrative access to, but only because my login credentials were tied to my employee account. An employee account that Jennifer, as a junior account manager, technically shouldn't have had access to. But she'd apparently figured out how to use my credentials. She'd fabricated billing records. She'd done it in a way that was almost clever, not by changing the amounts, but by creating entries that didn't match my physical presence in the building, knowing that the discrepancy would be discovered, knowing that it would look like I was the one who'd committed fraud. It was a setup. A perfectly executed setup designed to destroy me right when I was becoming valuable. The investigation took 2 weeks. Hartwell brought in external auditors. David and Mr. Harrison reviewed everything, and by the end, the evidence was undeniable. Jennifer had falsified records. She'd done it to discredit me. She'd done it because she was threatened by the fact that I was succeeding, by the fact that Rachel Kim wanted me on the account, by the fact that I'd somehow managed to outwork and outthink her, despite being an intern and her being a junior manager. She was fired on a Tuesday morning. I watched her walk out of the office with a box of her personal belongings, her face completely blank. Brandon had cooperated with the investigation and admitted to knowing about the scheme, which got him demoted and put on probation. But Jennifer took the full fall. Rachel pulled Meridian's entire account back under my leadership. The contract was renegotiated to reflect my actual role as lead strategist, not support staff. My salary was raised to $62,000 a year, with a bonus structure tied to the project's success. I was 28 years old, and I'd just won. But the thing nobody tells you about winning is how much it costs. I'd made enemies, real enemies. There were people at Hartwell who still believed Jennifer's version of events, who thought I'd somehow orchestrated the whole thing to get her fired. There were whispers in the break room, conversations that stopped when I walked in. 3 months later, the Meridian campaign launched. It was everything I'd promised: human, authentic, real. Within 6 weeks, their engagement rates had increased by 320%. Their user acquisition cost dropped by almost 50%. They closed 3 major enterprise deals that they credited directly to the new brand positioning. And Rachel Kim called Mr. Harrison personally to tell him that she wanted me as her account manager going forward for the next phase of the project and beyond. When I walked into the office that Thursday morning, Mr. Harrison was waiting for me. He asked me to come to his office. I was terrified. After everything that had happened, I'd learned not to trust corner office meetings. But instead of bad news, he offered me a promotion. "Account manager," he said, "effective immediately, reporting directly to me. The Meridian account is yours, and we're going to be looking at a salary in the 90,000 range, plus benefits, plus a performance bonus structure." I did the math in my head. That was more than triple what I'd been making when I started. It was more than I'd ever dreamed of making at my age. "There's something else," Mr. Harrison said. "I owe you an apology. I should have looked into what happened more carefully before I suspended you. I should have protected you. I didn't, and I'm sorry." I nodded. It wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough for those 2 weeks of hell, but it was something. 6 months later, I had my own office. Not a corner office, but real office with a door that closed and a window that looked out over the city. I'd hired an assistant. I was managing 3 accounts. I'd gotten my benefits, my 401k, my health insurance. I'd moved to a better apartment, one where the rent didn't consume half my salary. And Jennifer? I ran into her once, about a year after she'd been fired. She was working at a smaller firm across town, doing junior-level work for less money than she'd been making at Hartwell. She saw me at a coffee shop and looked away quickly, pretending she hadn't noticed me. I thought about going over to her, about saying something cutting or cruel. But I didn't, because by that point, I'd realized something important. Winning wasn't about revenge, it was about becoming the person who didn't need it. I'd spent 3 years working nights and weekends, learning every aspect of the business, proving myself over and over again. I'd taken the shot when it was offered, and I'd nailed it. And yeah, Jennifer had tried to destroy me for it, but she'd failed. And in failing, she'd shown everyone at Hartwell exactly who she was, someone willing to commit fraud to keep someone else down. I was willing to work harder, to be smarter, to actually care about getting things right. One of those approaches works out, the other doesn't. 5 years later, I made partner at Hartwell. I was 33 years old. I had a team of 12 people working under me. I had a corner office with a view of the entire city skyline. And I still remembered that girl in the navy blazer with the hidden stain, eating lunch alone at her desk, wondering if she'd ever matter. She did matter. She mattered so much that she changed the entire trajectory of her life by refusing to accept that anyone else's opinion of her was more important than her own. The motivational calendar is long gone, but the lessons stuck around.